Another Wednesday video for you. Today we're actually going to be finishing up my article series, Opportunity is Almost Everything. So this is the fourth part, the final installation for this year at least. I'm sure I'll be doing this again next year. So if you missed my other three before this, go ahead and watch the videos and read the articles. We talked about quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. Now we're on to tight ends. Tight end, it might not be the most exciting position to talk about, but it needs to be talked about nonetheless, just because there's value you can gain off of your opponent when we're talking about tight ends. So bear with me. I think I have a decent amount of information in this. So as always, in our Opportunity is Almost Everything articles, I talk about four major things. They are total opportunities, opportunities per snap, fantasy points per opportunity, and then I find a way to try to compare salary to opportunity as well. Let's see how that goes for tight ends. So we're coming into week 12 already. I didn't include week 11 stats just because I had to run all the numbers a little bit earlier than usual. So this is up to week 10, doesn't include last week, but the numbers really shouldn't change that much even if we factored them in. Everything more or less stays the same. So first thing we want to talk about is total opportunities for tight ends. When we talk about opportunities, same thing with wide receivers as with running backs. Any opportunity is any rushing attempt they get combined with any target. As it happens with tight ends, they don't rush a lot. Wide receivers don't either, but they tend to rush a little bit more than tight ends do. In fact, of everyone in the top 10 through the first 10 weeks in tight ends, not one of them had a rushing attempt. So take from that what you will. All these opportunities are going to be targets for these players. And the top three in opportunities, really no surprise that any one of these three is Travis Kelce with 89, Darren Waller with 71, and Mike Gesicki with 70. Gesicki might be a little bit stunning, just the fact that he snuck in there kind of towards the end of the year, at least the end of what I've been tracking so far. But regardless, that's the way it shakes out for the top three. Travis Kelce leads all tight ends and opportunities. No surprise there. What I do find more interesting is the fact that there is a big gap difference pay-wise between these three players. So Travis Kelce making $13.4 million per year. Darren Waller kind of right in the middle at $17.45 million. And then you have Mike Gesicki who's making $1.65 million. So kind of a big gap between all three of those players. It's a very good amount of parity between all these players and their salaries. So I like to see that, especially if that continues towards the end of the season. The other thing I wanted to mention is, so I wrote my article and I didn't get all the stats finished before all those games were played on Sunday, but I'm doing this video on Monday. So what's funny is that of all the tight ends, I said they didn't have any rushing attempts. Kelce actually had one in week 11. Funny enough, it's ironic how that works out like that, but it actually went for a rushing touchdown as well. So very interesting. Nonetheless, we look at opportunities. It doesn't really tell us everything, like the title says. Opportunity sometimes can be considered everything, but as we're about to see with tight ends, it really isn't. So up next, I like to look at opportunities per snap. Gives us a little bit better of an idea. Try to work towards some of those efficiency metrics that I like to deal with. So all the major four offensive positions, tight end is the one that's going to have the lowest opportunity per snap. No big surprise there. Makes sense. Tight ends are called on to do more than any other position other than receiving or rushing the ball. So they block on a majority of the plays. Top three tight ends for opportunities per snap. We have Darren Waller, Travis Kelce, and Mark Andrews. Those are the top three. And all three of them are right around about 15% for every time that they are on the field taking a snap, they get an opportunity, or at least in this case, target. So a few things I want to mention with the stat. First, Darren Waller's opportunities per snap, it might be a little skewed, as are his opportunities, because in week 1, if you remember, he had 19 targets. So just an amazing amount of volume in week 1. Since then, he's only totaled one game with 11 or more targets. So I'm not throwing these 19 opportunities out. Obviously, I could include these in the stats, and we shouldn't forget about this, but you got to try to realize that they're not utilizing them as much as they were, at least for sure in that game, but maybe not, the first half of the season, first couple of games of the season. So it is an outlier game. I don't think he's going to get 19 opportunities in a game for the rest of the season. I think right around 10 is going to be average for him. So it's just worth mentioning. In fact, that the fact is that 25% of his fantasy points so far have come in week 1. So it's pretty remarkable how skewed that was towards that 1 week. And then second, I want to show that even with a 15% opportunity per snap, so 0.15 opportunities per snap, Travis Kelce would rank as the wide receiver 6 in Dynasty Owner if he was in fact a wide receiver. So I'll put that in perspective a little bit. Kelce was a wide receiver. He'd currently be the 15th in opportunity per snap, just because he's a tight end. He does a lot more than just, run routes, get targets, catch passes. But despite that fact that he's 15th in opportunity per snap, he would be wide receiver 6 on the season. This tells me, well, one main thing is that Kelce is obviously vital to his team's success. We know that. But he's vital in more than just receiving running routes, as I said. He has a very high number of snaps, 610 after week 10. But he's a relatively low number of opportunities, at least compared to top-tier wide receivers. So very efficient compared to some of the top-tier wide receivers, at least in when he's running his routes, when he's getting his opportunities. So based on all this info, and if you already read the article, then you can kind of cheat on this, but all the info I presented you, any guesses who the top 3 would be for fantasy points per opportunity? So we're comparing every time a player gets an opportunity, a target, a rushing attempt, how many fantasy points are they getting on average on that opportunity? And this one kind of surprised me, although when I talk about it, it's going to make a lot more sense. So number 1 is actually Hunter Henry. Number 2 is Mark Andrews. Number 3 is Dalton Schultz. All 3 of these tight ends are very efficient with the volume that they are getting. Andrews is actually getting a good amount of volume this year compared to his past year, so it's a little bit of a moot point, but he's still being very efficient with the opportunities he's getting. So Hunter Henry, let's talk about him for a minute. He gets 2.82 fantasy points for every opportunity that he gets. And that's unbelievable. That leads every offensive category as far as running back and wide receiver so far this year. And what does this efficiency do to? Well, it's his touchdown dependency. So he has 7 touchdowns this season, and he only has 40 opportunities. So 40 targets, and he has 7 touchdowns. Just really remarkable how efficient he's been at finding the end zone, getting targets in the red zone, in the 10-5 zone. In fact, since week 4, he's only had 1 game where he didn't have a touchdown, and then one of those weeks he actually had 2 touchdowns, so he had a double touchdown game. If you remember back to last week, I talked about wide receivers. I talked about DeAndre Hopkins, how efficient he's been this year. Henry's been even more efficient in terms of what he's gotten. So Henry, like I said, 7 touchdowns with only 31 receptions, 40 opportunities. It's about a 17.5% of the time that Henry gets the ball thrown his way, he gets a touchdown. It also means that 22.5% of the time he catches the ball, he gets a touchdown. So really remarkable, really efficient. It's one of the best efficiencies I've seen, at least halfway through a season. If you remember Jimmy Graham, I believe it was last year, 2020, he had a similar stat line. He's very efficient. I think he ended with, I got it right here, with 8 touchdowns on only 50 receptions, and he had less than 500 yards. So very efficient. Hunter Henry's on pace to beat that. So we got to see if he keeps that up through the rest of the season. It's really going to come down to the touchdowns because I don't anticipate his volume to go up too much. Interesting thing that I found going through all these stats, so I thought I'd share it with you. Other 2 names, Dalton Schultz and Mark Andrews, they're staples of efficiency over the past year and a half at least. Andrews, pretty much his entire career, he's been efficient. Low volume, high production guy. And Schultz, just hyper efficient. And he almost has to be on that offense just because there's so many mouths to feed in Dallas. Obviously probably not this week, even last week, with Amari Cooper going down, and now, CeeDee Lamb probably being questionable coming into Thursday night game. But that's a different story for a different article. Go ahead and read my Thursday night articles that's coming out. Should be coming out this week as well. It'll be about all 3 games on Thanksgiving. So pretty excited about that. Anyway, so then the last thing I want to do, as always, I compare salary to opportunity. No real good way to do this. It's a little clunky the way I do it, so I just throw out the stats for you, and you can kind of delve through it and see what you like. So what I did was I expanded the top 3 that I showed here for fantasy points per opportunity. I expanded that to a top 10 list. So it shows you all the top 10 tight ends in Dynasty Owner ranked based on their efficiency and fantasy points per opportunity. Obviously, Hunter Henry's still number 1, Andrews 2, Schultz is 3. Kyle Pitts comes in at 4. That's a little bit. It's worth noting, at least. He's gotten quite a bit of opportunity compared to some of the other tight ends on this list, but he's been a little touchdown dependent as well, even though he hasn't had many. Number 5 is Travis Kelce, and then you can go and read my article to read all the way down. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but everyone after that top tier, if you get Henry, Andrews, you're starting to get to that tier of like between 1.6 and 1.9 fantasy points per opportunity. Still very efficient. Very good. But like I said, a lot of these tight ends have to be that efficient to be fantasy relevant. So you see a lot of touchdown dependencies. When you're picking a tight end, maybe not necessarily a Dynasty Owner, but a little bit Dynasty Owner as well, you're picking a tight end who you think is going to score that week. Unless you have Andrews, unless you have Kelce, unless you have Kittle, you're kind of taking a gamble on, do I think this tight end has a 40% chance to get a touchdown today, because that's going to put you over the edge of your opponent. A few clear-cut values when it comes to tight end, especially when we look at this metric. that was really my goal throughout these 4 article series, was to find a better way to view efficiency. So we obviously have the salary. We need to see what players are doing when they're on the field, when they're getting the ball thrown their way, when they're getting rushing attempts, and how efficient they are with using those targets and rushing attempts to get fantasy points. But when I combine salary with fantasy points and fantasy points per opportunity, we see that the top 4 tight ends that stand out in terms of overall efficiency in my books are Mark Andrews, Dalton Schultz, Tyler Conklin. Yes, that's a little confusing probably for some of you, and then Mike Gesicki. Conklin, let me just read off his stats since I kind of threw his name out there. He obviously has a very low salary. He's under $700,000. He only has 49 opportunities, and he has 88.3 fantasy points. So pretty efficient. He's right in the middle of efficiency. He's getting 1.8 fantasy points per opportunity. Still very efficient. Not in that top tier, obviously, like Henry and Andrews, but still an efficient tight end. Not necessarily giving you the fantasy points that you'd like to see, but with that salary, no complaints. I would have no complaints if I rostered Conklin this year. Barring injury, so like always, I talk about who I think will be the value of the year for each position, as I've done with all the articles. So for tight ends, there's virtually no chance it's not going to be Mark Andrews, just with how cheap his salary is and how good he's been this year. Barring injury, that's the only way that he will not be the value of the year, is if he gets injured. And, we hope that doesn't happen. He's had an amazing season, really an amazing career, and just want to see him get through this entire season healthy. That'd be really, really special to see, a really special season from a tight end. So it's also worth noting that Andrews is only 23.4 fantasy points behind Kelce. And that in itself is deceiving because Kelce hasn't had his bye yet. So he had actually one more game in hand over Andrews. I don't expect Andrews to pass Kelce. I think Kelce has his bye this coming week 12. So I don't expect Andrews to get 23 fantasy points, 24 fantasy points to pass him. But it's just worth noting that Andrews is very close to Kelce. Another testament to how great of a season he's had. And the fact that Andrews' salary is 6% of Kelce. So just really incredible value that he's been this year. That's really all I want to talk about. Finished up this article series. It's a good one. This is one of the things I like talking about most to you guys. So I hope you enjoyed it. And you probably won't see any of these stats until next year. But I look forward to doing these every year. Usually try to do them in November, right around the halfway mark of the actual regular season, kind of getting close to the end of the fantasy season. So I appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter, Dynasty Jerk. Follow us at Dynasty Owner for sure. On Twitter at Dynasty Owner, and then on YouTube as well at Dynasty Owner. You can catch all my videos there as well. I appreciate everybody listening. Take care and be safe.